Hope for the best and prepare for every other scenario. That's the standing operating procedure for teams right now with a big question mark in their everyday lineup. And that's where the Braves find themselves at with shortstop. This is BPTV, Cory McCartney and Grant McAuley with you as always. And Grant, the Braves are hoping to get free agent Dansby Swanson back, but word comes that if they're not going to pursue one of the big players at the position, and they're preparing their in-house options to pick up the pieces.
Well, I mean, that's great. And here we sit in the middle to latter portion of November, but I don't think that this story has written its final chapter by any stretch of the imagination. Number one, you've got four great shortstops that are still out there. And even if the Braves aren't in on two or three of the others, I still feel like this partnership with Dansby Swanson and the possibility of a reunion, that definitely has legs. I don't think that we can rule anything out at this point, but we'll see as everything starts to percolate on the hot stove, as you like to say, where exactly some of these guys land, and of course, what this market's going to look like. But I will continue to maintain, I just have a hard time believing that the Braves could watch somebody as productive as Dansby Swanson for as long as he's been walk out the door, and the Braves don't make any kind of move to upgrade themselves at that position in his absence. And it may not be an upgrade over Dansby Swanson, but I just don't look at the in-house options and say, you know what, we're going to be just fine here. I could be wrong. We could be recording this a year from now, and maybe things will be different. But as of this moment right here, as we're sitting, I think we got a lot to discuss.
Yeah, and obviously, Dansby Swanson rejected the qualifying offer that the Braves gave him, $19.65 million, just a formality for both sides. The Braves had to cover themselves in case he does end up signing somewhere else. And Dansby, of course, willing to bet on himself and hit that free agent market. But let's look at those in-house options, because Vaughn Grissom, a shortstop by trade who was thrust into the second base role last year after Ozzie Albies' injury, has been in New Orleans working with Ron Washington in what we will call Camp Wash for what's been planned to be 3 one-week sessions, one a month through January, to potentially get them to spring training, to potentially get him ready to play shortstop on an everyday basis. Add him with veteran Orlando Arcia, and the Braves have the potential to have some average production, but maybe not that all-star production that they've been used to. What are the expectations for you, Grant, if we end up seeing the Braves go with that Arcia-Grissom tandem at shortstop?
Well, again, my expectation is that that doesn't seem like the most likely outcome here, but for the sake of hypotheticals and, fantasy booking or whatever else we want to call it, I mean, this is nothing but a good thing for Vaughn Grissom to go and get this work in, because I think that one of the things we heard a lot about Vaughn Grissom as a prospect was, hey, this guy's going to hit. He gives you really professional at bats. Not sure what position he's going to end up playing long term. He's a shortstop right now. He's athletic, quite obviously. He moved over to second base, a position he'd really not played much at all at any point at any level in his pro career or amateur career. And I thought he did a pretty fine job over there. But, long term, the question about sticking at shortstop is still one that's pretty valid. And thus, you see him off in the winter working with Ron Washington. I still think from a developmental standpoint, and from a consistency standpoint, he could benefit from being at AAA Gwinnett and getting some regular playing time, both at the shortstop position and in terms of being able to just kind of go to that finishing school and continue to find consistency at the plate, because we didn't see that after the first 3 or 4 weeks that he burst onto the scene. Things looked great then. Things got the hits got a little bit harder to come by as he went along in the big leagues, and that's not surprising for one of the youngest players in all of baseball. I don't know what to make of Orlando Arcia other than to tell you this is a fine reserve infielder who I think has served the Braves really well and given them a jolt at times. We have seen him at the big league level play shortstop every single day for the Brewers, and they chose to go a different direction with that. So I don't remain convinced that this is going to be the duo that, Alex Anthopoulos is going to say, this is the absolute, the answer to our question right now, the best that we can do this winter, whatever the case may be. Long term, to make a long story short, or, at least cut it off right here, I think Grissom is a big piece of the Braves' future. Where he fits and when he fits as an everyday player is, I still think, kind of up in the air.
Yeah, from a defensive standpoint, I know there's some question marks as to whether, as you mentioned, Grissom can transition to shortstop. I will tell you from a metric standpoint, the arm strength was around the 63rd rank in terms of what he was producing there, mile per hour wise, at second base. So that may not play all that well at shortstop. On the other side of it, though, Arcia was around 13th, and we know what that arm is capable of. Obviously, he's played that position on an everyday basis before. Offensively speaking, Grissom was on that NBA Jam kind of on fire when he first got to the majors. I don't see this this being a Carlos Correa to Jeremy Pena-like situation what they had in Houston, which obviously went all too well for them. But Grissom did still hit well overall in his first season. 291 average, a 792 OPS, 121 weighted run created plus. But if you take his numbers against lefties, albeit less than half of his at-bats that he had against righties, he still hit 61% above league average. You look at Arcia, hit 19% above against righties. Maybe not a straight platoon with a couple of righties, but the Braves could at least play the hot hand, supplement those two. But I have to agree with you. I don't think this is what we're going to see from the Braves at shortstop when the season opens. And if the Braves don't bring Swanson back, there aren't a lot of premier shortstops beyond that little top group. There's not another free agent who's projected to have over a 2 WAR with Fangraphs. Elvis Andrus, Jose Iglesias, Aledmus Diaz. That's kind of the next group that you're looking at. They're all on the wrong side of 30. They could go the trade route. Willie Adames has 2 years of control left with Milwaukee. But we've talked about this before. If it's not Swanson and it's not a big time name, why spend the money on shortstop? So if the spending is not going to be at short, Grant, where are the Braves going to turn?
Yeah, and I think that that's really valid. And, we've talked a lot about, and we'll talk even more, it appears, just based on the news that we're hearing this week, financially speaking, that the Braves are going to continue to spend. And that trajectory that we've seen from the past few years is just going to keep going up, up, up. It's not going to happen overnight. I don't know how many times I can stress that, but you should feel pretty good if you're a Braves fan about the fact that the Braves are going to be continuing to put more money into their payroll moving forward. That said, there are going to be some limitations, and this is going to be not necessarily Alex Anthopoulos having to shop on a budget by any means, but there are some other needs for this club. I know we talked about left field and DH, and offloading Marcell Ozuna would probably be one of the many plates that's spinning right now in the air as well, to try to make sense of what you can with that position, because that's been a cloud hanging over it for a while. I'm going to put that off to the side, though, and just kind of go back to shortstop one more time. And, if they do try to stopgap it with one of those veteran shortstops, I don't know that it necessarily really gives you that much of an upgrade over what they do have in-house. Maybe that is the case where you look at it and say, okay, well, Vaughn Grissom has shown us some flashes, and he certainly did. And I don't want to understate, or excuse me, I don't want to understate what he did when he came up, because the Braves needed that jolt that he gave them. It's a consistency standpoint that after that first 3 or 4 weeks, he cooled off tremendously. And so, whether it's he and Arcia alternating games or in some kind of platoon, or the Braves go out and get somebody that can help them out, I just don't know that money, as you said, is very well spent at shortstop. So in the rotation, they seem to be pretty well and good. I think that they could spend a little bit more in the bullpen. I think that they will, whether that's big money to bring back a Kenley Jansen or someone like that, or just to continue finding arms that just make you that much stronger at that position. There are going to be some intriguing free agents out there that just aren't on our radar right now that might just make the Braves better and change the equation at a couple of spots. But I just have a hard time looking at left field and DH for that matter and thinking they might not throw some money towards that to shore up a couple of the weaknesses that this club had in those 2 spots from a production standpoint, and that's across all of baseball.
Certainly, there were a lot of positives from Vaughn Grissom getting that exposure last year. You could be talking about a situation where the Braves had their number 1 prospect, a shortstop who's never seen the major league level, and you question in this situation, okay, can you turn the keys over to him? At least they know, offensively speaking, that he's shown that he's capable of producing at the major league level. But I have to, again, go on this. I don't see them spending money there unless it's going to be for Dansby Swanson. So you mentioned there is a chance to upgrade in left field. There's a chance to upgrade at DH. Obviously, Andrew Benintendi, a high OBP guy's out there. Mitch Haniger, Brandon Drury, one who has a 30 home run season, one who's been on the cusp of one. You've mentioned JD Martinez before. A lot of these guys around that $10 to $14 million range on that AAV. So let's say the Braves are moving on from Marcell Ozuna and his $16 million guaranteed each of the next 2 seasons. If that's where the additional 26 to 30 million comes from, getting better in left/DH and eating the Ozuna money, aren't the Braves ultimately better off?
I mean, I don't know there's any scenario that by moving on from Marcell Ozuna and bringing basically any other even semi-productive hitter in that you haven't moved forward and, in a net positive. I mean, they're going to have to eat some money, I think, to make that happen. And clearly, if you go out and sign a guy like Benintendi, he's going to get a multi-year deal. Like, with Mitch Haniger, based on his injury history, be able to land a multi-year contract? Not sure about that. That makes him an interesting candidate. Same thing with JD Martinez, who is coming off a long-term arrangement with the Boston Red Sox and might just be one of those kind of bounce-back one-year deals that we've seen Alex Anthopoulos utilize in bringing in some impact players over the past few years just for a jolt in that one season. I just have a hard time looking at shortstop and thinking that you go from somebody as, meaningful to this club in a variety of different instances, as Dansby Swanson is, and just handing the job over without there being a real push towards bringing him back. And I still think there's a lot of the winter to go to figure this whole thing out, but I don't expect that they're going to at any point pivot from Dansby Swanson to Carlos Correa. I don't see that happening, but they would be better off if they're able to offensively upgrade themselves at a couple of spots in left field and DH. And maybe Eddie Rosario is part of that mix as well by just simply being healthy and able to see the baseball this year. There's a lot of different things that go into it. It's just everything seems to revolve around the question of how is shortstop going to be handled? And as of right now, we don't have the answer to that.
Well, we're waiting on the first big domino to fall this hot stove season. You and I are picking out our honey baked ham locations that we're going to be staking out for the duration here of the holiday upcoming season. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all impacts the Braves to-do list. And we'll have every bit of it covered here on BPTV. So make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, tell a friend, and don't forget to find us on From the Diamond on 92.9 The Game in Atlanta, also available wherever you find your podcasts. Until next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you soon, Braves country.